The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's emergency room hummed quietly, painting everything in that cold, sterile white that made even the air feel lifeless. Rachel Thompson sat hunched in a hard plastic chair, her fingers twisted together so tightly her knuckles were pale. Every few seconds she considered standing up and walking out, pretending nothing was wrong, pretending she was fine. At 29, Rachel wasn't the type of woman who made scenes. She was the quiet one, the librarian who found more comfort in stories than in people. Books didn't stare. Books didn't judge. Books didn't ask embarrassing questions. But today, the walls of her perfectly ordered world had cracked. Something deeply personal and humiliating had forced her to step outside her comfort zone. She'd spent 3 long days hoping it would go away, convincing herself she was overreacting. It hadn't. And when her best friend, Lisa, had shown up with that no-nonsense glare and said, "Either you go to the ER or I call an ambulance," Rachel knew she had no choice left. Rachel Thompson called a nurse with kind eyes and silver streaks in her hair. Rachel rose slowly, heart pounding, and followed her down the gleaming hallway. The smell of antiseptic hit her like a wave. Every step made her cheeks burn hotter. How do you explain something so personal to complete strangers? How do you keep any shred of dignity when your body is betraying you in the most humiliating way possible? "Room 7, the nurse said gently. "Dr. Martinez will be with you shortly. Try to relax, dear. We've seen everything here. Nothing to be embarrassed about." Rachel gave a stiff nod, but said nothing. Inside, her stomach twisted. She changed into the thin hospital gown, clutching the edges around her like armor. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly as she sat on the exam table, staring at her trembling hands. A soft knock broke the silence. "Miss Thompson?" "I'm Dr. Martinez." She looked up and froze. He was younger than she expected, early 30s maybe, with warm brown eyes and a calm, grounded presence that instantly eased the air in the room. Instead of standing over her, he pulled up a chair, sat beside her, and smiled gently. "I understand you've been having some discomfort," he said. "Why don't you tell me what's been going on?" Something about his tone, steady, kind, unhurried, made Rachel breathe a little easier. His eyes met hers with quiet reassurance, not curiosity or judgment. So she began to talk. Hesitant at first, then gradually more open. He listened carefully, nodding, occasionally asking a gentle question. "What you're describing," he said finally, "is actually very common. It's a bacterial infection, easily treatable. Nothing you did caused this, and you have nothing to be ashamed of." For the first time in days, Rachel felt her shoulders loosen. The examination, though awkward, was handled with such professionalism that she forgot to feel embarrassed. Dr. Martinez explained each step before he took it, his voice calm, his movements deliberate and respectful. When it was over, he washed his hands and said, "We'll start you on antibiotics. You should feel relief within 48 hours, and you'll be fully recovered in a week. I'd like you to follow up with your regular doctor in 5 days, but if anything feels off, come straight back, okay?" As he scribbled the prescription, Rachel found herself studying his face, the soft lines near his eyes, the quiet confidence in his movements. There was something about him that went beyond the routine of a doctor doing his job. It felt personal, genuine. When he handed her the prescription, their fingers brushed for a brief moment, just long enough for her to feel something she couldn't quite name. Their fingers brushed just for a second, but it was enough to send a faint flutter through Rachel's chest, something she hadn't felt in years. That tiny spark of warmth lingered long after he'd turned away. "Dr. Martinez," she said softly as he prepared to leave. He paused at the door. "Yes? Thank you for being so understanding. I was terrified to come here. That same gentle smile returned. That's what we're here for, Rachel. And please, call me Miguel. His voice was warm, reassuring. Take care of yourself. And remember, there's nothing weak about asking for help when you need it. When the door closed behind him, Rachel sat there for a moment, staring at the prescription in her hand, wondering why her heart was beating so fast. A week later, Rachel returned for her follow-up appointment. The infection had cleared just as Dr. Martinez, Miguel, had promised. Physically, she felt fine. Emotionally, though, she couldn't explain it. Part of her was hoping, ridiculously, that she might see him again. Instead, a different doctor, Dr. Williams, greeted her. A brisk woman in her 50s with wire-framed glasses and the kind of tone that left no room for small talk. She ran through the usual questions, nodded in approval, and said, "Everything looks great. You're fully recovered, Ms. Thompson. You can return to normal activities." As she updated the chart, Dr. Williams added almost offhandedly, "Dr. Martinez asked me to tell you he's glad you're feeling better. He doesn't usually follow up on patients personally, but he seemed particularly concerned about your case." Rachel blinked, caught off guard. "He did?" Dr. Williams gave a small smile. "He's one of the good ones. You don't find many like him anymore." Rachel left the hospital with a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. She was healthy again, grateful for that. But the fleeting connection she'd felt with Miguel seemed like just that, fleeting. A brief crossing of paths that life would soon erase. 3 months passed. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. The city library where she worked was her sanctuary again. Rows of neatly stacked stories, the soft hum of the heater, the comforting stillness that wrapped around her like a blanket. Sometimes, when she drove past St. Mary's, her mind would drift back to that night, to his calm voice, his steady gaze. But she'd tuck the memory away, reminding herself that not every meaningful encounter was meant to last. Then, one Saturday afternoon, while restocking the medical reference shelves, she heard a voice behind her. "Excuse me," the man said. "Could you help me find something on community health initiatives?" Rachel turned and her breath caught. Standing there, in jeans and a navy sweater, was Miguel Martinez. Without the white coat, he looked softer somehow, more human, and even more handsome than she remembered. "Dr. Martinez?" she said, unable to hide the surprise or the sudden warmth rising in her chest. "Miguel, please," he replied with that familiar smile. "And you're Rachel, right? From the ER a few months ago?" She nodded, touched that he remembered her name. "Yes, that's me. So, community health?" As she led him down the aisle, he explained, "I'm working on a project to set up mobile health clinics, places that can reach people who can't easily get to hospitals. Rural communities, elderly folks, anyone who's been forgotten by the system." Rachel felt a spark of admiration. "That's incredible. Let me show you some databases that might help." They spent nearly an hour exploring resources, talking about his research, swapping ideas. But soon their conversation drifted to books they loved, places they'd dreamed of visiting, little details about their lives that came out effortlessly. Eventually, Miguel glanced at his watch. "I should probably let you get back to work," he said, though his voice lacked conviction, like he didn't really want to leave. Rachel hesitated, then surprised herself. "Actually, my shift ends in 20 minutes. There's a nice cafe just down the street if you'd like to keep talking." He smiled, the kind that warmed his whole face. "I'd like that." And just like that, what began as a casual encounter in the medical section turned into the start of something neither of them had expected. Over steaming cups of coffee, Miguel told her that he'd chosen emergency medicine because it let him help people at their most vulnerable, when fear and pain stripped away everything else. He spoke about growing up in a small town where the nearest hospital was an hour's drive away. How, as a child, he'd watched a neighbor die waiting for help that came too late. That moment had shaped him. No one, he said quietly, should lose someone they love just because they live too far from care. Rachel listened, her eyes soft with understanding. "That's beautiful," she said. "Hard but beautiful." Miguel smiled. "What about you? What drew you to library work?" Rachel hesitated, then surprised herself with how easily the words came. "Books have always been a safe place for me," she admitted. "Libraries are one of the last truly fair places in the world. You don't need money or status, just curiosity. I like helping people find what they need, even when they don't know what that is." Miguel leaned back, studying her with quiet admiration. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "what you do and what I do aren't so different. We both help people who walk in uncertain and leave a little more whole." She smiled, the warmth between them growing as naturally as breathing. What began as a simple coffee chat stretched into dinner, and dinner turned into a long walk through the city park. Streetlights shimmered on wet pavement as they talked about childhood dreams, favorite books, and the funny ways life had tested them both. When Miguel walked her to her car, the night was cool and still. "I'd like to see you again," he said, his voice quiet but sure. "Not as a patient, obviously," he smiled, "but as someone I'd really like to get to know better." Rachel felt her heart lift. "I'd like that too," she whispered. 6 months later, Rachel stood once more in the bright, humming halls of St. Mary's Hospital. But this time she wasn't a patient. She was part of something bigger. The air buzzed with excitement as people gathered for the dedication of the new mobile health clinic, a dream that had grown from Miguel's early idea into a fully funded, county-wide program. Rachel watched from the front row as Miguel took the stage, microphone in hand, his confidence steady but humble. "Healthcare," he said, "shouldn't depend on distance or income. It should be a right, not a privilege." His words drew applause. But what moved Rachel most was the quiet fire in his eyes, the same compassion that had once calmed her fears in a sterile exam room. She thought of all the nights they'd spent hunched over laptops and paperwork, planning routes, writing grant proposals, and chasing donations. Every setback, every victory, they'd faced them together. When the ceremony ended, Miguel found her in the crowd, a wide grin lighting his face. He reached for her hand. "So," he teased, "how does it feel to be dating a guy who's technically a millionaire now?" Rachel laughed. "Considering every penny's tied up in the clinic, I think I fell for the doctor, not the bank account." "Good thing," Miguel said, squeezing her hand, "because I fell for the librarian who wasn't afraid to help a stranger find what he was really looking for." That night, in Rachel's cozy apartment, surrounded by stacks of books and half-read medical journals, the world felt small and safe again. Miguel leaned back on the couch, his voice quiet. "You know," he said, "that day you came to the ER. You were terrified, but you still walked in. That took courage. You reminded me that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who admit they need help." Rachel smiled and curled up beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. In that moment, she realized how far they'd both come, from fear and loneliness to something real, something worth holding on to. The journey hadn't been planned. But maybe the best stories never are. Rachel leaned back against Miguel's chest, her voice soft and thoughtful. "You know what I've realized?" she said. "Sometimes the moments that embarrass us the most, the ones that make us feel exposed and helpless, are the very moments that end up changing our lives. Miguel smiled, brushing a kiss across the top of her head. Remind me to thank that bacterial infection someday. Rachel laughed, the sound light and genuine. I'll make sure to send it a thank you card, she teased. But beneath the laughter, she knew exactly what he meant. The things that once filled her with shame had somehow led her here, to a man who saw her, truly saw her, even in her most vulnerable state. Funny, isn't it? She continued softly. The things we try hardest to hide are often the same things that bring the right people into our lives. Miguel's arm tightened gently around her. Maybe that's life's way of humbling us, he said, reminding us that connection starts when we stop pretending to be perfect. The room fell quiet again, but it was a comforting silence, the kind that only existed between two people who had found peace in each other's presence. Around them, the soft lamplight glowed against shelves of books and stacks of papers, tiny reminders of the worlds they'd both come from and the new one they were building together. Rachel gazed out the window at the city lights flickering below. Sometimes, she whispered, the moments that make us feel most alone are the ones that lead us home. Miguel looked down at her, eyes warm. Home, he said softly. I like the sound of that. They sat there like that for a long time, wrapped in quiet contentment. Two people who'd met by accident, bound now by something far deeper than either could have imagined. And maybe, Rachel thought, that was the greatest truth of all. That even life's most uncomfortable moments could be gifts in disguise, doorways to love, courage, and the unexpected kindness of a stranger who became something more. So if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you never miss the next story that might just touch your heart.